Come on. Okay, well, I am natural, but I got to know how to I don't know how to intro the whole podcast. Hi, everybody. This is the MI101 podcast. MI stands for music industry. And this podcast exists as a place for music and industry to converse. So the idea is we're going to have musicians and we're going to have people who are in the music industry come together to talk things out that are on both sides of that equation. And today I've got Yogi. He looks like Rob Lowe. He's with me again on the MI101 podcast.
I'm here again. I'm a part of this.
And you know what? You're wearing the same jeans jacket that you were wearing that time.
I
have a feeling if I look back on the podcast on YouTube, like if I go back to the original stream, you're going to be dressed the exact same way.
I have a different shirt on where it's Amoeba Records music, Black Flag.
Hold on, I'm going to compare it. I'm going to look at the last one.
But I am wearing the same jacket, you know. Okay. It's cold out. It was summer in Berkeley, and now it's all of a sudden it's winter.
Uh-huh.
So this is my winter coat, my green winter coat, everyone.
Your green winter coat. Okay, hang on. I'm going to just see. I think in the very first one we did... Nah, man. In the very first one, you were wearing the same thing that you're wearing now.
Is it the same shirt? Can you see what shirt I'm wearing?
Okay, listen. Just so everybody knows, I'm looking at the... This is from the previous episode. Okay, look at what shirt you're wearing there. I think that's the same shirt.
No, I'm wearing a Flying Lotus shirt in that shirt.
You're wearing Flying Lotus, and what's this?
Amoeba Records. Local Berkeley record shop.
Why would these look like they look like the exact same shirt?
They do. We can't really see. It is a black, written text.
Okay.
And a white shirt. That's very observant of you, Tomas.
But no, wait. But your official story is that it's a different shirt.
It is, yeah.
Are you wearing different pants?
Well, people wear costumes every day. And you can, choose which costume you want to wear. So this is my Thursday costume.
Thursday costume. So it's Thursday, March 3rd. And today's a special day. I don't know why, but it is.
Or there's almost World War III happening.
Yeah, indeed. Indeed, World War III. That's a serious topic. I wonder how a country invading your country affects musicians. Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah.
What do musicians do in a country that's gone to war? Say that into the mic.
Should get used to that. Music has always been the voice of protest, isn't it?
But is it but is protesting what you're going to do if the entire country is gone to straight up fighting in the streets, or more than fighting in the streets? It's just there's a foreign power coming in.
There's missiles being dropped.
Yeah, it's you're not gonna. That's after the protesting phase has already lived its course through, right?
Yeah, I would probably flee.
You as a musician would probably flee. You mean?
I think so. If you're an artist, I think you're pretty perceptive, and no matter if you're a musician or any other medium, you'd probably feel this coming and would want to go or fight.
There must be it must be down the middle. There must be some that decide to stay and fight, and there must be some that decide to go elsewhere and flee their country, as I think every citizen of that country would reach that fork in the road where they have to decide do I stay with my family and do I flee with them and try to protect them that way, or do I, anyways, this is quite a downer thought, but it's worth it to think as a musician, you would be kind of I don't think that there would be many contexts where you could bring people together and play your music for them, during times of war.
The subway, it would be a way to soothe people for sure. If you were hiding in underground bunkers.
Yeah, but if you're hiding in underground bunkers, you're probably not going to want to make music and make noise or whatever.
Well, if you want to soothe people, I feel like it'd be soothing, right? I don't know. It's true. If there's a militant army looking for you, no, you wouldn't want to make noise. But if there were times where we were being bombed or something. That would be a soothing thing. I feel like I don't know. So you're serenading people, like I don't know, to take you away from being bombed. That seems like I don't know if that's a thing.
I mean, we have no way of knowing because we've never lived in a war context in that way, like where there's just, outright violence on the streets like 24/7, and yeah, I can't imagine it, period. But I would imagine that, musicians re-gravitate towards their calling independent of those circumstances. Like maybe they like all of this stuff is going on around them, but they still find the place where they can make music. And maybe that causes them to flee too. Maybe they're like, oh, I have some connections in some other part of the world. I'm going to flee this like dangerous and chaotic place, and I'm going to go there and I'm going to make music the way that I want to make it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think about like the early 1500s or something where like musicians were out in battlefields or something and they would just get shot or whatever.
Actually, you're right. There's like totally like the band, the marching band for like the army or whatever. Yeah. Like in I guess for example, cymbals, right? Cymbals, like the ones that you crash, that was like supposedly something that was brought to the West after it was observed in like Turkey with like Ottoman armies that would roam like in battlefields, and they would bring drummers and stuff with them that had cymbals, because like the Turkish invented cymbals. Somebody needs to like, obviously if somebody knows that that's not true or they have their own alternate theory, they should comment that somewhere, like who's watching this podcast. But this is the story that I heard, because like cymbals, the company Zildjian, or if that's how you pronounce it, they're Turkish. Anyways, so cymbals as an instrument was something that comes from that culture, and that was observed first by Westerners, like or people not from that culture, when they came into contact with their armies. Because they would bring those.
What do they do during a war? Like, how do they use cymbals? Or just like when people are just firing guns?
No,
just
like when the army's marching, they're playing things to kind of bring the soldiers to like want to
fight.
Yeah. I mean, they're trying to regulate the emotions of the soldiers. So I would imagine in other armies, they do song, like call and response kind of songs or whatever. Like they do that in the American army. I don't care to think about that as, art, but in some way, the songs that accompany soldiers on their journeys, that's part of the role of a musician too. And that there have been situations in history where that was artistic.
Yeah.
That in nature, that was expressive. They had complex arrangements for army bands that I think is pretty, it's worth understanding and appreciating.
I mean, that just makes me think about music igniting your soul and your spirit. And you can do that in a lot of different ways. You can do that within a war setting, but you can do that in a venue,
I mean, in a venue, that's what's explicitly being done.
People just like freak out.
Yeah. No, I mean, like in a place where even people are like, permitted, or where the objective is to have people enjoy music. I mean, you think of some outdoor festival in San Francisco in Golden Gate Park, and there's people trying to like bury themselves into the mud, just because they're so into whatever music they're watching, or maybe they're also on a number of substances or whatever, but they're enjoying it to that degree where they'll get their bodies entirely muddy and they'll just, freak out to a show. And I would imagine that if you were like really like on your way to the battlefield, that music would be of a different character.
For sure.
Your reaction to it would be different,
Yeah, but it's just like interesting that it's a tool to like move somebody to either dance or fucking kill. Like the fuck?
Yeah. It can accompany
or have sex.
Indeed, yeah. Or like, work out.
Yeah.
Too, I think people are hearing music. Actually, if you think about it, you're kind of hearing music constantly in a lot of the stuff that you do. And you might not even be paying attention to it. Like when you shop, for example, there's a musical experience that's crafted towards shopping. And there's a musical experience that's crafted towards armies. Yeah. And there's a musical experience that's crafted towards you know, punching someone in the face at a punk venue, you know? And the venues kind of exist to facilitate that depending on what it is. Like if it's a hippie festival, there's got to be some mud.
And dancing.
Yeah. And like
Nakedness.
people with cats on leashes and stuff. But
yeah.
you know,
Paint.
if it's
Lasers.
dancers, yeah. And you know, if it's a battlefield, it's got to be people going to war, you know? And I would imagine even that like people who are flying like, you know, F-13 or you know what I mean, like jets through the sky or whatever. They're probably listening to music.
Did you see any of the footage? They're like bombing the cities right now.
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
with,
totally.
Like,
I mean, the perspective of somebody who's involved in that directly.
Yeah.
Sometimes I contemplate it and I imagine there's music that accompanies it. But I think that the music is probably, I don't think that they're the ones making the music. You know, or at least like in that scenario, the people that are actually making the music are not the people that are also doing the bombing and the killing.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
Like if anything, the musician will be like, I'll just go and play music for you guys so that you are at peace. You know, you're achieving some sort of mental and spiritual tranquility, even in the course of this like horrible thing that you need to do.
Yeah. It's pretty terrible and evil. Can you look up Howard Zinn artists in the time of war? Just like a quick Google search and like the bullet points of that. So that is really interesting. Just like, you know, if you were an artist, how would you react to being bombed right now?
I would almost be certain that those who are, you know, artists, like songwriters, they've got to be like writing very intense songs about the situation that they're going through.
Yeah.
You know, like having to escape from your homeland or whatever. There's probably been countless really beautiful songs that have been written about exactly that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on that note, how are you doing this week?
Doing pretty good. I'm applying to school, grad school. That's been great. I've been producing another podcast show.
What's the other podcast that you're producing?
It's sort of like it's a class on Native American spiritual ways. So it's a spiritual elder from a Native American church here in Berkeley, and he's just teaching people about spirituality.
Do they have music at their like services or? I don't know if they do services or they do. And what is that music like? What is their its performance?
A lot of musicians go to ceremonies, and it's like definitely like an integral part of a ceremony to like guide people and soothe people through like difficult times, and also just like movements through the ceremonies to signify an end and a beginning. So yeah, that's how it's used. But a lot of musicians are attracted to it. Like Graham, he's a musician. So
Graham Patzner?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, sick violin player.
So yeah, I feel like a lot of musicians identify with like spirituality and music and how that comes out in different ways in any culture, not just Native American culture. Yeah. I mean, have you experienced that? Have you performed or like been in a ceremony where there was something like that?
Actually, I mean, feel like when you play at a church, maybe you're kind of participating in that.
Yeah.
And I played in a church band for about 3 years. Yeah. And shout out to Jesse Strauss, by the way. He played bass in Abundant Life Christian Fellowship Church.
Epic.
It was like epic place. Yeah. And we would perform for their Sunday service. I also, you know, like I also know that there is a church scene of church musicians, especially here in the Bay, but basically all over, that are, it's a thing deeply, deeply rooted in like people's lives. Like they start there when they're 5 years old and they just always play in the church. That I haven't, been that into it. But for the 3 years that I did, it was really interesting to accompany people's spiritual day because I'm not a particularly spiritual person. I mean, I am, but on my own terms. I don't kind of have a place where I practice it. I just kind of feel it,
I mean, that's what is spirituality. It's a feeling. It's like an unseen. It can be seen, but music is spirituality because you feel it so deeply. I think Aretha Franklin, she started off in the church. She was a church singer, right? Like,
Yes, 100%.
and yeah, a lot of great musicians have coming out of the church, especially black churches. I feel like drummers are amazing or in church bands.
Mm.
Was James Brown in a church? I feel like he's like a preacher, like vibes.
Yeah, I think, I mean, especially the music of James Brown, but in general, all of the music that we listen to has its roots in the church music of specifically the church music of, the African American community since, the inception of the United States. That's where the root of all the music that we listen to comes from.
Yeah.
For sure. But, it's music being performed in a devotional ceremony that I think traverses all cultures and is something that is really, it's a really like wonderful thing to witness, because it's kind of like music played with its most pure intention, as opposed to where you're playing music for money necessarily. I mean, even though like the people performing music in those contexts are generally making money as well. But like when we've commodified music and the intellectual property of music to such a point where, you perform it to make business off of it and make a living, rather when it's performed in a devotional sense, you're kind of witnessing music for music's sake.
Yeah.
For the impact that it has on the audience or the listener and how that, affects their devotion to a higher thing other than themselves.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing that music can put you in touch with that higher self and lift you up in that way. It's very mystical. For real. Like the creation of the universe started with sound. The Big Bang was sound. So I think it is a very mystical phenomena for sure.
Yeah, it's both parts like mystical and lifestyle. Like it's incorporated, it's embedded in your lifestyle.
Yeah. I like Indian classical music a lot. Devotion music as well. Like the sitar particularly. It's very like trance inducing. And rhythm too. Like rhythm on any percussion, but particularly the sitar, like when those are combined, you just go into a trance. I feel like drums have that ability to put people in trances or change your brain chemistry to be in an altered state. Pretty incredible.
Indeed. Yeah. Speaking of the sitar, have you ever checked out a Bay Area artist named Gabby Lala?
No.
Oh, yeah. Gabby Lala. Shout out to Gabby Lala. You know who Gabby Lala is, right? Yeah, totally. Gabby Lala is, she's a singer-songwriter from here in the Bay. She's, been doing her thing for over 10 years now. And as Gabby Lala. Before that, she was also in like Les Claypool's band.
Really?
And yeah, and she has like 3 or 4 of her own albums that she's put out as a solo artist after that, and many of them have been really successful.
Oh wow.
And yeah, she is kind of like, I don't know, like one of those Bay Area characters that really like carved out a niche in, because she plays the sitar.
Let's get her on the show. Come on the show.
Yeah. Right on.
How do you know her? Have you like played music with her, or have you seen her live? Listened to her records?
I did. I saw her live at the Bay Vibes Festival. Shout out to Robin Applewood, who definitely would have been there. And Charlie Hunter, I believe, is like the trombone player that put that on. But anyways, Gabby Lala was one of the acts at a Bay Vibes, an iteration of the Bay Vibes Festival. You know the Bay Vibes Festival, right? Yeah, totally. And yeah, I remember seeing her solo work. I remember just like really admiring how she did sitar and like soloed on the sitar and like did this amazing cover of Man Who Sold the World, actually, which was really dope.
David Bowie.
Yeah, David Bowie. Indeed.
That's awesome. Have you ever played with sitar players or Indian classical music players or tablas? How does it usually make you like feel, or like what are the vibes? What do you like most playing with that? Have you played in that style before? Or
I've never played it, but I know that it incorporates tonality that is not really that of Western music, or like that you don't commonly hear in Western music. So I'm kind of like sitting there, feeling touched by the sensation of, other kinds of melodies that don't normally come up in the music that I listen to, normally on a day-to-day basis, or at least that I hear around me in society on a day-to-day basis. So I don't totally understand it. I don't totally have reference for what is going on with it, how to play it. But it certainly is beautiful.
It's like Phrygian minor.
See, that is like the whole way that people want to understand music. Like they want to be able to talk about what scale something's in and therefore know how to play it. But I think that with all music, even music that you could just say, okay, that's some kind of Phrygian dominant scale, right? It still has like a logic to it where like the melody is an actual statement. It's an actual sentence that they're saying.
Yeah.
And like I noticed that in the Balkan music, the Balkan Bacchanal that we have here every month at Ashby Art Space. By the way, we're streaming from Ashby Art Space. And so, and we have a monthly Balkan Bacchanal that's put on by Peter Bonos. The next one's happening on March 19th. Just a couple of weeks. Anyhow, you'll notice in that music that they're playing in, let's say, the Phrygian scale. But if you listen to the music, you don't hear it as just like, I'm playing the Phrygian scale. You hear a full like melodic idea that's being countered by other melodic ideas that I don't know if they necessarily experience them as though like I'm playing in the Phrygian scale right now. They're experiencing more like, I'm saying this thing that is said in this music.
Yeah. How do you learn that language? Like
you play it. You got to play it like with those people, like over and over again, and have like, I mean, and you grow up playing it, I think too. That's a musician that really, really speaks that language, grew up with it in the way that you grew up with speaking English, and maybe somebody else grows up in speaking like Korean, or someone else grows up speaking whatever linguistic group they're a part of. As a musician, you interact with and jam with like musicians of a particular musical tradition from the time that you're little, and hopefully it's through that process that you really learn the language of a particular genre, like Balkan, like we all listened to the other day and shall listen to on March 19th as well.
Shout out Balkan music. Yeah, it is really interesting, and we're just like making sounds right now for a language. It's just like tones in our voice, and it's interesting to be like multilingual, both culturally but also musically.
Someone once told me that part of the Bay Area music scene that's really particular is that the Bay Area is big enough to the point where there's music work going on regularly around you. If you're a gigging musician here in the Bay and you're have a certain level of proficiency, you'll be gigging around, right? You'll play different, but a lot of the musicians that do, they play many different styles because also the Bay is so small that it doesn't have enough of every scene going on to where you could just be a musician in that scene. So he gave the example. This was Colin Hogan. He's really amazing keys player here in the Bay. He gave the example that, in New York, maybe you could like live and you could just be playing jazz gigs, like straight ahead jazz gigs. And that's what you do every night. So you don't have to really like sink your teeth into other genres. But if you're in the Bay, like, and you're a jazz musician, you're going to spend a good amount of your time playing hip hop. You'll spend a good amount of your time playing, rock or pop or whatever other thing comes your way. and therefore the musicians here have like a more varied palette and sound, just like because of that, just because of how the scene operates, how the economics of the scene operate,
Yeah. So it's so great about different cities. It has like a different flavor of that.
True.
New Orleans, Chicago.
They're going to have their own musical tradition that is represented in that city because of that very phenomenon,
LA.
And then the Bay is just like, the Bay has a lot of different musical genres going on, but it's all kind of like, it's all very particularly Bay.
Yeah.
The music that's from here.
And it's interesting, like the different types of movements that's come through here up until now. Do you feel like there's a movement happening within the last 10 years of what sort of we experienced in Oakland and Berkeley and San Francisco with both like house shows and venue shows? And
one could argue that gentrification, for example, has brought with it a certain musical tendency, right? The fact that so many tech companies operate here in the Bay, that has had an effect on how the music scene operates and what's popular here amongst the people here, and what they book at the biggest festivals. It's like a lot of it has to do with the influx of people from other places. And at the same time, there's been the homegrown scene of people that have always been from here, but even those people are the descendants of people who have come here from other places, like specifically the Bay. Specifically the Bay is like that's a trait. Like hip hop here, is like there's like a whole. I feel like a genre of Bay Area hip hop that has its own
several
specific flavor to. Yeah, several. Yeah.
Lev knows Bay Area hip hop pretty well. Like, have you interacted with Bay Area hip hop?
I'm a little bit older school, right? So I came into hip hop like 25 years ago. So the scene that I know the most is a little bit older now. There's folks who are still making music for sure, but the younger generation is doing things that are totally different. Really amazing work actually. Like they're producing music that is again very uniquely California, very uniquely Bay Area.
What?
Hey, I just want to make a plug really quick. There's an artist, Kosciuszko, Bay Area rapper who is playing at the at the Starline Social Club.
Starline Social Club.
Yes, Starline Social Club.
What's the date?
Let me see.
Here's the date. Here it comes.
Saturday, March 5th.
March 5th.
Saturday, March 5th. It's Kosciuszko, Seb Torgus, and Joe Wax. And anyways, it's like he's a dope Bay Area rapper. This is his first time headlining a show in the Bay Area, from what I understand. But he's actually been doing his thing and collaborated with a number of like really high profile rap artists and is himself a dope MC. I've kind of listened to a lot of his stuff just because I've been interacting with the Starlines calendar for a few different things. And that particular one caught my eye. And since we were talking about Bay Area hip hop, I wanted to shout out Kosciuszko, Saturday, March 5th. Anyways, sorry.
March 5th.
March 5th.
Starline Social Club, Oakland,
Social Club,
California.
Starline, yeah, Starline, that place. It's like, they're opening back up. The New Parish has opened back up. UC Theater is open for shows now. And SF Jazz.
Cornerstone.
Pretty much everywhere has kind of come back with their own like calendar of shows. All of the venues that, operated before, what?
The Panty.
This 3-year-long Panty. Venues are starting to open back up. I think that's a good thing.
Oh, great. Yeah, no, it's incredible. We need it. Everyone is craving
Everybody
it.
was kind of like, really huffing and puffing about not being able to see live music and I think a lot of people still don't want to go out to see live music. I mean, from what the venues are all kind of messaging on everything is that it's safe to go to indoor shows. And I believe basically it is. Like, I know that at least in the Starline, they installed a ventilation system that has an air replacement rate of every 30 seconds. So all of the air in the room is completely recycled every 30 seconds.
It's pretty phenomenal.
Shout out ventilation.
Shout out ventilation. And I would imagine that places that are opening back up are, doing so with a plan to keep that okay. I mean, Ashby Arts, we kind of look out here because we have an outdoor stage. And like everything that we do show wise is going to be outdoor. Like when we have Agua Pura here on the 13th, that's going to be outdoor. And anyways, yeah. So venues opening back up.
They're so important. I'm so glad to be a part of one here.
What was the last local show that you went to?
I went to the Boom Boom Room to see Anthony. And
What, Oakadelic?
yeah.
And they played with Big Trippin', right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was Boom Boom Room maybe like 3 weeks ago on a Saturday. There were maybe like 40 people there. It was a cool show.
Boom Boom Room feels good with 40 people. I mean, it's not like terribly a well-paid situation for musicians that are doing that. It's not a well-paid situation for the Boom Boom Room either.
I mean, all the musicians were shredding. It was an amazing vibe. People were dancing. Yeah, I loved it. It was great. What was the last show you went to? You went to Balkan show, right? Like this past year?
The Balkan show, yeah.
Where were the bands playing?
So there were members of Fanfare Zambaleta. It was basically headed by Peter Bonos. He's trumpet player, extraordinary, trumpet player in that genre. And he brought together, I think, musicians from different bands. I mean, people from Inspector Gadget were there.
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome. That's real cool.
Yeah, it was really, really impressive. And I was moved to it, moved by it, moved to it and moved by it.
Sick.
I saw Lev, dancing out in the. What was really awesome about that show is after the music was done from the amplified, like on stage, they just kind of came down and wanted to continue playing music acoustically, because like the playing of the music had a kind of significance that transcended the like, oh, we've scheduled you to be at this event. It was almost like, this is what we want to do right now.
That's great.
And almost because of that, as I was watching it, I couldn't help but be moved by how perfect it was. Kind of for that reason, because everybody was there. It was like, we just want to be playing this. We just are doing this because we want to, as opposed to that we've been invited to, or we've been scheduled to, or we're somehow doing it to like impress this audience. There wasn't really an audience there. It was more like they were sharing amongst themselves. And with us too. We were there. Like there was, a good 15 of us that had stayed to enjoy that part of it. But that's pretty remarkable.
Balkan music makes me feel rejoiced. Just the feeling of being rejoiced and joyful. That's usually how I feel when I'm around Balkan music.
Yeah, it's very celebratory music.
Yeah.
Indeed. And I'm sure it also had its military application at some point, just to go back to what we were talking about earlier. Like there's the Balkan marching bands that have been, Balkan war marching bands that have probably been like, yeah, we're killing it, just like they've got chops for days,
Yeah, does anybody know the history of Balkan, like marching war bands? Lev, you know any history?
I do not. I'm sorry.
Anyone? I don't know. You should look that up.
We should have Peter Bonos on the show. To kind of like educate us about it.
Peter Bonos.
Yeah.
Come on.
Write that down. Somebody write that down. Canuto, can you write that down? Yeah, Peter Bonos. Just that we need to like reach out to Peter Bonos, because like
we're coming after you.
Yeah.
Come here.
First of all, well, he is going to be here March 19th with Fanfare Zambaleta.
Oh, great.
That is happening. And yeah. So I don't know. At that time, like we should ask him, but I don't think that like that occasion needs to turn into an academic. Like if a musician feels the responsibility to explain that at the show, like do an educational program on something like Balkan music, it loses that feeling that, they get by just like, no, this is what the music is.
Yeah, that's not what a show is for. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe when you're playing something as an instrumentalist, you almost don't even want to talk about it. You want to like tell people with what you're doing, even if you're like playing punk or something like that. You're like, no, I can't explain what it is. I just have to do it for you.
Yeah, museums explain in venues you feel and act it out.
Right. Right. What about Canuto? What was the last show that you went to? Don't say the Balkan thing before the Balkan thing.
Oh, it's been a while. It's been COVID, man.
Don't say the word.
You gotta give me some more time to think about it. It's been so long. Maybe Tool, but that was like
Tool
2 years ago. That was Tool.
Yeah,
and Over
I
Him
mean,
the
Tool
Band.
would have been 2 years ago. I'm sure they were playing the. They had just released an album at that point, right?
Oh yeah.
Man.
Here in Auckland, pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Lucifer's now touring. If you guys into
Where do they play?
Lucifer.
Tool.
No,
Tool-
Pucifer is. Oh, okay. You were talking about Pucifer because that's Maynard James Keenan's like other project or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're
Totally.
touring right now.
They're touring now.
They're starting like soonish. But yeah.
Oh, nice.
It was in the San Jose Arena, something like that called.
Nice.
Kind of forgot. But yeah, dope show. Really good. Recommend.
I thought they played not the UC, the Greek Theater. Yeah, I know I went with Lev. We saw Les Claypool. That's probably my favorite pandemic show. Was Les Claypool? He covered Rush.
Oh,
Yeah, it was incredible.
Great crowd.
Yeah, Greek Theater. That was my favorite pandemic show. Do you have a favorite pandemic show of just like being in
man.
it and being at a
Favorite-
show?
So, but we're
still in it.
We're still in
We're
it. So
still
that's what
in
I'm
it.
saying. It's kind of like whatever the last show. Like sometimes for me, the last show I went to was my favorite show. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So in a way, the Balkan Bacchanal with Peter Bonos, that was like my favorite show because that was the last one I went to. But I really had to think about which was my favorite pandemic show. Phew. It's hard. A lot of the live music that I actually see, it's because I play it. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Which I'm not trying to sound like, it's just I almost like don't go out and see bands because I myself am the one who's out there playing. You
Do
know,
you have a favorite show during this time that you've played with Fantastic Negrito?
like that I've seen just since I've been associated with him.
During the pandemic.
During
like,
the pandemic.
Because like it was such a bummer, being hiding, and then like they're like, okay, we have shows now. So like to be able to experience that as a band, playing for people and igniting people's souls, lighting their spirit on fire again,
Right.
to dance. Like, was there a venue or a show in particular where you really saw people like coming back and really feeling it?
Yeah. Definitely, 100%. I mean, even the Brooklyn Bowl in New York, they opened up for an event, and it was a private event. And New York had been at the time particularly like on the down low with like regards to, the panty, and meaning like there hadn't been a lot of indoor shows, since then. And they opened the Brooklyn Bowl for an organization that was raising money for a mental health cause. So it was like a private event, but people had bought tickets to it.
Oh, that's great.
And I saw two amazing artists. One, I think his name is Langhorne Slim, and he's a singer-songwriter that just has like something about his voice is just, it pierces through, it penetrates, and his songwriting and his song structures and everything. And that was a really, really good show. And I noticed that people were reacting to it in a way that it just seemed like they were really happy to be at a live show. I mean, I can't explain. And everybody's had that situation because really, like, we haven't completely stopped going to shows. Like, at no point in the pandemic did I really go that much more than like a couple weeks without seeing some kind of live music.
Yeah.
So that being said, like, but when I first started to see kind of the old feeling of what a show was like happen again, I remember that was kind of my favorite because it was the first time in a long time,
For me, it was outside the UC Theater, like on the sidewalk, or like on the
and then
street.
that would have been because
And it
that was one of the shows I was doing with the UC Theater at the time, and we were putting like a small PA out there and just getting tips and everything. That was great.
I personally have a lot of anxiety, and large crowds freak me out during a pandemic, at least during the first 3 months. So for me, it was like coming out of like a nuclear war, the afterlife of it. I was just like, I need to be at a show and be with people. I'm kind of freaked out, but I also want to feel and dance and
Yes. That's kind of full circle. Like
Yeah.
from we were talking about at the beginning, just like what might musicians in, in Ukraine, for example, like that are suffering through like the crisis situation right now, what are they doing? And then how do they find their way like into the world with their music after that? When it hit here, the pandemic began, there was like a few weeks in which legitimately nobody did anything. I mean, it was like pretty sparse. And then people started coming out with their videos and, doing different kinds of video editing things to like be able to compose and write and work on stuff remotely. And now that's become like in part of a thing, but now people are doing shows again.
Yeah. I feel like being on the streets, like a street performer, street musician, and also a venue musician. I don't know. I feel like that would respond to the war pretty immediately. Street musicians.
Street musicians, yeah. That would be a trippy scene to kind of imagine, like a street musician just like busking for coins in the middle of like a war-torn post-apocalyptic situation where it's like buildings are bombed out and there's just like destruction all around you. That's a pretty like, it's a pretty strong image.
I mean, as a musician, you could also play for the soldiers, the Ukrainian soldiers,
Right.
Like, they probably need like help, like playing for going to their bases or, just soothing them, playing for them. I mean, in times of war, bands tour and they do that, right? They like go to different army camps and perform for the troops, It's happened in different ways.
Actually, yeah, there's a whole industry that books American and musicians from all over the world specifically on a military basis.
Yeah.
To like entertain troops and stuff. Comedy too. Like people do comedy on military bases and it's a big deal. It's a whole circuit that kind of helps to employ musicians. I guess it's again part of what we were talking about earlier. There's been the musicians that accompany the warriors that are going to battle like throughout history, and now it's part of the industry.
Yeah. I feel like Henry Rollins, I listen to a lot of interviews of him, and he talks about going there for the troops and doing things like that. A lot of musicians. Do you know any musicians who've done that? Have gone on tours like that or played at a base?
I did know a guy, Tito Miller, from a band called John Wayne and the Pain that's based in Minneapolis, was based in Minneapolis. I don't know. He was their drummer. And I remember him telling me that he really came up in the Navy, like in the Navy band. And there's something about it that was perfect because it was so tight. They had like a level of accuracy and like genuine musicality that they had to live by as the Navy band, that coming up through that, I think it made his chops and his timing and everything about how he does music very wonderfully precise.
That's awesome.
Yeah, totally.
What bases were you go to? Like what? Like or like
I mean,
country or?
I don't know, but it's like they book you sometimes. Even like I've seen documentaries of like musicians or comedians that go like pretty deep into war, like country or whatever, like where they're, at least a military base that they have to be escorted to with like actual military accompaniment and stuff like that.
Yeah, I've seen like Robin Williams tours, comedians. You're totally right. I'm really excited to have your friends on, especially in the Baltic scene, to talk about that. They hear the history, their stories. I do this tomorrow if you want.
You want to get together tomorrow? What do you say, Lev? Shout out to like people who enjoy podcasts, because I'm one of those people, and I wonder if like people would actually want us to do this every day, just literally just get on. We
would just have to put it out and see what happens. I feel like, because you don't know until you see what happens, right?
Yeah.
Like people are gonna respond to this. I think that's what's important.
Totally. You think that, I don't know. I mean, I hope that we're like, it's going to be kind of like Debbie Downer. I hope it was interesting, you know?
I think for sure.
And then, like, I'm messing up this like tablecloth. It makes like no sense. No sense at all.
I think talking about topical issues in real time is a good way to spread this. That's how a lot of media spreads quickly. I don't think we're being downer at all. I think we explored the history of music and like a feeling of like wartime, or not but music during wartime. It's an interesting aspect about the music industry, people touring. I think and that's why I want to talk to your friend, because like he knows more about Baltic music. I think talking about that at this time, but we don't have to like talk about war.
I love how you've actually been pointing at the empty chair. So you're like, I'd love to talk to your friend, and I wonder if this like actual chair right here is like in the camera angle, and then we're like sitting here like you know, just imagining that someone's here. Peter Bonus is right here. Peter Bonus is like with us, you know.
Hey.
Hey Peter.
Hey Peter.
Tell us what scale is Balkan music actually in? He's being like, yeah, it's in Phrygian. Like, you're right. Yeah, shout out to Peter Bonus. Totally. What about Lev? What was your favorite pandemic show?
Oh, definitely. It was the first one after venues opened up, and I went to the New Parish to see Delvon Lamar. It was an organ trio. He plays organ, Hammond.
Who's the one who's playing at SF Jazz soon, right?
Yeah, shout out to Delvon. He'll be at SF Jazz coming up.
Oh. Was that on camera?
Yeah, we're still recording.
We're still that is dope.
Lev, you want to see what's going on?
Right. He was pretty honest. He was just like, okay, I don't think that's for me.
Oh, cool.
But we are in Berkeley, California, everybody. I will just say we are at Ashby Art Space, and our door wasn't essentially locked at that time. It is now. But I don't think that person meant any harm. They were just kind of like, oh, hey, I don't think this is for me.
Yeah, I think they were just curious.
I will say I've been socially inappropriate enough to walk into a number of places where that was my first reaction.
For sure.
Like opened up a door in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I'm just kind of like, oh, I just wanted to see what was going on here. But I think I'm going to step out of this.
I've also snuck into places like that. So
right, totally. Been like, hey, I think I'm supposed to be here.
Yeah.
And honestly, if this gentleman was interested in learning about podcasts or wanted to be a part of a podcast or would have been willing to sit down and act like he was Peter Bonus, you know, and could like just like vibe on that joke with us for a little bit, that would have been actually a really interesting thing to have happened.
Peter Bonus, I totally agree.
We've like mentioned his name 15 times. It's because he's playing here at Ashby Arts. We want everybody to know that there's a show on March 19th, Fanfare Zambaleta, led by Peter Bonus, who is a musical genius.
Where's the show?
At Ashby Arts.
Ashby Arts.
Yes. So we're streaming live from Ashby Art Space.
It's in Berkeley.
In Berkeley. Indeed. So, Canuto, what was your favorite pandemic show? You went to at least one show during the pandemic.
Actually, now you reminded me, Yogi. I did go to that sidewalk event outside UC.
Oh yeah, outside the UC Theater, totally.
I was supposed to help you out with the music.
You didn't help me out. Come on, you didn't help me out at all.
I got drunk. You know,
yeah, you got drunk.
Of course.
You got drunk, but you did actually gift me a mic preamp.
That is right.
The Focusrite thing. That's actually been great. I have that set up in my studio right now, and I use it for, like, if I'm recording a guitar, I use it when I'm using like a STM58 mic, exactly like this. I'll run it through that, so it just warms it up in a way that, you know.
Hey, those are analog transistors from the 90s, brother. You know? Exactly. You gotta get some warmth in there.
Yeah, I'm gonna use that and sound like Nirvana, man.
What is an analog transistor? Is it metal or a spring? What makes it so unique?
A motor?
Well, I guess
motor?
No, I don't know.
I do not remember the exact details of it. You're talking about like MOSFET transistors kind of thing. It's a type of, well, it's what replaced actually the tubes, right? So from tubes, you have some like magic quantic thing going on that you had some amplification going on there. But then someone invented the transistor, which reduced significantly the size of the tube, and ultimately, you had like portable radio. Portable in the sense like, the size of a lunchbox. That was like pocket size at the time. So innovation, and that all got replaced later on. But I guess yeah, some people like still thrive and just pursue that warmthness, right? That's why like so there's a boom in tube amps, for example, for just home stereo. And just like I have a tube amp, I'm just looking for that.
Yeah, they sound way better.
Do you know that, like, by the way, during the penny, okay, like companies that made amps, like Orange Amps, Marshall, like all this stuff, and home recording gear, mics, tube compressors, and like there may be like specific things that I could point to in the industry, but people who make the companies that make those things did extremely well. Like they were sold out of all kinds of microphones and everything because people were setting up their home studios, so everybody was like buying new stuff,
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, new amps. Orange Amps had like stuff on back order. Yeah,
I bought a synthesizer, piano. I learned piano.
you learned how to play the piano.
Yeah, the circle fifths in major.
Circle of fifths in
I can
major
play
on piano.
I'm learning I Am the Walrus.
That is a song in this, like, with all major chords in the circle of fifths, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just learning like pop songs, but I've been playing guitar and bass for so long. Piano's a different feeling, and I've always wanted to experience that, and it's cool to be able to play with both hands and just play a new instrument. How many instruments do you play?
I really just play guitar. Play bass too. I can play bass
Yeah.
the way a guitar player plays bass.
It's like a different
And-
language. It's fun.
Yeah, you're doing a different thing within the music. I did play a gig on bass one time. Uriah Duffy let me borrow his bass. I really appreciated it. And I set up, and then I learned these songs, and it was with a band that does like a kind of a tribute act to the Gypsy Kings, and they're called Gypsy Nation. Okay, and it's actually really good. Like everybody in the band is really, really good at that style of gypsy music, and sounds just like Gypsy Kings. And the thing was, that song, that style, you can learn the chord changes and you can learn the bass lines, but the number of times that they play each section is different every time. And it doesn't respond to necessarily like we think of chunks of 4 happening of every musical phrase. So when they happen in 4s, you kind of know, okay, we're going to the next section. It didn't work that way. The music was just structured differently. So I remember kind of like I couldn't really back them up on bass in the way that I probably could, like a band that was playing I Am the Walrus, right? Which I can just learn how it is.
Yeah.
And they would, they sent me all the songs, and it was like, oh, they're in, the original key that is in the recording. So I was like, okay, great, I'll learn them in that key. And then I got to the thing, and none of them were in the same key. They would basically say like, what key is it in? They would just play the first chord of the song, and I'd be like, it's in that key. So I'd have to kind of like mentally figure it out, and that was stressful.
That also sounds challenging and fun.
Yeah, I guess it was.
Yeah, it's interesting to be able to switch styles like that. But I also feel like when you do something like that, somebody has to kind of like let you in on the language or like tell you the secrets or talk to you ahead of time. Like I show up to a lot of jams and I have to ask people, I'm like, hey, what's going on? Like, what key are we in? And like, I don't know, did you talk to them beforehand in terms of like, okay, what should I think about when going into this? Or they were just like, show up and play?
Yeah, actually. Well, honestly, a lot of the really, like some of the most amazing musicians that, in the Bay, they're able to show up to a lot of gigs like that.
Yeah.
And I think I want to just commend that level of talent, because it's not only about like how versatile you are in whatever style you're playing, but it's also about how many songs you literally remember. Like you remember the entire song and how the changes go and the breaks go. And if somebody were to stretch a section of it, you're able to follow them because And I maybe know a fair number of songs to that level, but I think that the working musicians here in the Bay have like a very extensive repertoire. And then those that work in, as you know, we were talking about earlier, like the musicians that are steeped in that culture of Balkan music, or the ones that play in black churches, for example, or the musicians of the different like really lifetime rooted folkloric traditions. They have repertoires of infinite number of songs within that folkloric repertoire, you know. And jazz, you might have an infinite number of jazz songs that you know like how to play, and so playing over one that you've never played before still becomes kind of like just fun. You can be loose with it, but yet perfectly precise.
Is there like a Bay Area fake book or like a scene fake book where like, are you just sort of expected to know?
There's the Lucky Devils wedding band gig sheet list that has all the songs that they play, and a fair number of the musicians that I'm referring to probably have all of those like super down. You know, Don't Stop Believin'.
Cool.
And whatever, 24 Karat Magic. Yeah, those are, and that I feel like is an important list to know if you want to like keep getting work to play in the Bay Area.
We need to do an Instagram poll, just like a question, like what would you put on a Bay Area fake book, and just like see what people, how people respond.
That's actually a really good.
Yeah.
Anthony Ant has his Facebook, his fake book. You know, like he's got the songs that he, whenever he brings that funk band together, he's like, a lot of the songs kind of get repeated in the set list, you know.
We should, is this its own Instagram account? We should make its own Instagram account. The podcast itself, Music 101.
Do a poll. If people want us to create an Instagram account and like populate it with content, aside from the Ashby Arts Instagram account,
we do both. Like it could be posted to both.
Okay, but you want to kick us out of your Instagram. So you want to kick us out of your Instagram, basically.
It's going to be both.
Yeah, pushing it out of the nest so quickly, it's like barely able to, you know, like hold its own weight up. You know, you still got to be like regurgitating food into its mouth and stuff. regurgitate food into the mouth of this podcast.
I have to pee.
We're not there yet.
I have to pee. Hang on.
Do your thing. Yeah. Now the whole podcast is fucking ruined. The chair. So we got to pretend that Peter Bonos is in this chair right now, and I'm gonna just like ask Peter Bonos. So, what scale is Balkan music actually in? And he's gonna be like Phrygian, and then Yogi will yell from the bathroom and be like, "Yeah, I told you." Oh God, because you can't take a break when you're on the air, can you? Jump in, yeah, Lev. Just take Yogi's seat.
I'll just keep it warm for him.
Totally. So you pretend like you're Peter Bonos, and I'm gonna ask you. So, what scale is Balkan music actually in?
It's on the most amazing spiritual scale that just reaches people. It just brings out the joy in them.
No, you're acting like
The
you're
joy
Yogi though.
scale.
You're so what you said was a very Yogi response, which is perfect because you're warming his seat right now. But a Peter Bonos response would be like, well, let's let Peter Bonos do his response when he comes here on the podcast. Continue with what you were saying.
The joy scale, that's the scale that Balkan music operates on for me. I mean, I just hear it and, you know, what's that Mingus tune? You better get it in your soul. You know, it's like when I hear the percussion and the horns and, you know, the accordion and the violin and it all comes together. It's just like, you just can't help but want to move. It's quite an experience.
Quite an experience. Indeed. Ashby Art Space has a GoFundMe campaign.
We do. We have it up right now, and we are currently rebooting our video. It's going to be released soon. We are looking to go ahead and bring this to fruition and get the doors open on the cafe this summer.
So I listen, the URL, gofundme.com/let's-open-ashby-arts-space.
Let's open Ashby Art Space.
Yes, indeed. So why do we need a GoFundMe? Like, explain kind of what you're trying to do with this space and with the funds that you get in order to open this space. Like, what are you trying to do?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really fortunate that I've been able to secure a significant investment to get the doors, you know, in our hands, and now we can build upon this, but we still need to build out the interior of the actual cafe space. We need to add in a bar. We have to do plumbing, electrical work. We have to soundproof our AV room and studio. And these are all going to be, renovations that are going to be happening in the next, 4 to 5 months. So I'm really looking to partner with folks in the community who want to see another art space, a thriving venue here in Berkeley, here in the